Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
How are you? Pleasant.
Baruch Hashem, how are you?
Yeah, beautiful day today. Really enjoyed it.
I know, wasn't it crazy?
Uh-huh. Yeah, the flowers should be coming out soon, just in time to get zapped by the next cold wave. That's what you.
Well, I don't know. Wow, it's 49 right now, which means that it must have been in like the mid 50s during the day. It was supposed to be in the 30s, and of course they're announcing snow for the night.
Well, good. We're planning to for a couple days of skiing tomorrow, so I hope it snows.
I would not be skiing in Riverdale if I were skiing.
The place to be. But
yeah. Do you ski?
Yeah, we like both. I grew up doing cross country in Toronto. There's not much downhill skiing around there, but there's beautiful cross country north of the.
Did you ever do downhill?
Yeah. When we moved to New York, we started young, and we decided to try it out, and they all loved it. So we all.
So when I lived in Europe, I used to go to do downhill skiing a lot in the Alps. In Switzerland, mainly. I can brag. I'm a foreigner.
Been to the Pyrenees, which it was amazing skiing. It was so good. I mean, we're not
experts. It's gorgeous.
And have we been elsewhere in Europe? No, we haven't been skiing anywhere else in Europe. But yeah, we go back there in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was when I was growing up. We used to go there was this 1 week break in February. That's when I guess kind of like President's Day here, like around the same time, but nothing to do with President's Day because they don't have a president, to actually celebrate at that time. But it was a great time to go skiing. So we used to go. Yeah. France, Switzerland, whatever it is that we found,
Yeah. So. In Canada, they decided a number of years ago they wanted to have a holiday in August.
What kind of holiday?
Well, so first they started calling it August Bank Holiday because there was really no occasion. They just we should have a holiday in August because, we all. And then they ended up calling it Family Day or something, or was that?
Oh, that's ridiculous. That sounds like all these silly holidays you find on the internet. It's Donuts Day, and it's like Grandmother's Day, and
the legal holiday though. That was the thing.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, whatever it is that they're gonna give you, take it.
Trying to be more European.
Yeah, your parents still there?
My parents live in Israel now. They moved to Iran.
Oh yeah, that's right. I don't know why.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
So yes, we're hoping to go for Pesach in a postponement of this trip. We hope third time lucky. I hope we'll see. We have tickets.
Yeah. I was supposed to go in December, and it fell in the 3 weeks that they closed, so that did not happen. But I mean, I spent the whole summer there last summer, and I'm going back this summer for a month, so I'm not complaining.
Yep. Particular plans while you're there, or any programs?
So I started this halacha program with Midreshet Lindenbaum It's actually done by Ortora Stone. It's a 4-year program for international women scholars. And so during the summer, you have to go for a week for like some kind of like, not internship, but whatever it is that you call it, like
residency.
Yeah, residency, right. So yeah, so I figured it out. I said I'm going, that's 1 week. So, but my parents live there and my siblings live there, and I have enough vacation. So I asked and during the summer in CUNY, we don't work on Fridays. So that's that's less days for me to use as vacation time. So I asked I was a little bit like, worried that my boss would say, a month, are you crazy? But he didn't say boo, didn't care. Yeah, go for it, bye. So.
Very enlightened.
Yeah.
Teach at CUNY?
6:53. Give it 2 minutes.
What do you teach at CUNY?
Oh, I don't teach. I'm actually the director of student finances. So I collect all the money from the students. I'm the bad guy.
See, you don't get to give out the scholarships or anything like that?
Well, actually, actually, I don't give them, but the checks to reimburse the students come out of my office. So we're kind of like, in that sense, whether it evens out. It's we're the good guys for that part. So.
That's good.
Although you should know how many students are not interested in having direct deposit to their bank account, and how many students are not capable of updating their address and come crying that they never got the money because it was sent somewhere else.
Well, you know what? That just happened to me. We have a client who we had 2 invoices sent on the same day, and one of them was paid by direct deposit, ACH, and the other one didn't show. And I figured like then they were for the same amount, it was like 2 phases of their project. So I thought like maybe they marked it as a duplicate or something. So after a month went by, which is the payment terms, I emailed them and said like, what happened to this payment? And they're like, no, we paid it out by check. I'm like, and we use a mailbox in the city that like I never check because we never get anything there unless I know to expect something. I never check it, but turns out it wasn't there either. So I don't know.
It's interesting because it's like when I worked with Turo before, and in Turo everything was the last 3-4 years, maybe more. Everything was electronic, so we didn't even accept checks in house. You had to pay online, or you had to pay online. It was credit cards or electronic checks, and only if you didn't have like a bank account and you wanted to pay by money order or that kind of thing. But in CUNY, oh my gosh, they accept cash, which already like is awful. La brute. And you have like all kinds of different things, and people don't believe in paying electronically, so that's a problem, although they had to get used to it during the pandemic. All right, I sent a message that we're starting, so I think we should start.
Yeah, I mentioned that because we actually had changed our mailing address. And so sent it to the old address because I never bothered to update it with anybody because nobody ever sends us anything. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I refuse to put my fax number on my email, for example. It's like people still use a fax. I'm like, no, you're going to email me. I don't know what a fax is. It's 2022.
But you want to hear something? This last week, we sent out a contract for we're hiring somebody as a consultant, and it's written by a lawyer, and so it says something like if you have to notify, here's the address, or you can notify by fax. We don't even have a fax number, but that doesn't matter. And she said, well, shouldn't it allow email? So I'm like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. So I sent it back to the lawyer. So he sent back this long paragraph because an email is not a legal address because, it's personal, right? So it's like, you have to first specify that everybody agrees that this is fine. So it's not so simple.
It's not as safe, I think, is what they say. But, whatever. It is what it is.
All right. Okay, let's begin. Okay. So we're 3A at the top, the 4th line. So we had just explained that usually a Hiresh is someone.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Hanan, Shavua Tov. Just started. 3A, fourth line from the top.
Chagigah.
So a cheresh, usually in the Gemara and the Mishnah, is a person who is deaf and mute. We had said that that there's a difference here. If you're only one of those, deaf or mute, so then with regards to the korban re'iyah, the appearance sacrifice, the pilgrimage sacrifice, they're off the hook, even though they only have one of these conditions. But a Chagigah, the celebration, the festival sacrifice, they are required. So now why is that? So the answer is Lilinian Re'iyah in the pilgrimage sacrifice, Gamar Re'iyah Mihakel. So that we learn from Hakel. So the mitzvah of every 7th year, the king reads from the Torah to the whole people, and we'll see in a minute how that what the rule is for someone who is deaf or mute. But first, let's look at the background. So the mitzvah is gather the people, the men, women, and children, and uksiv bevo kol Yisrael leiros. And it uses the word leiros when everyone comes to be seen, right, at this Hakel ceremony. Well, guess what? That's the same word, right? Leiros is Pnei Hashem, to be seen by God, is the mitzvah of pilgrimage. So the rule of, as we'll see in a minute, the rule of a either deaf or mute person is off the hook for Hakel. Therefore, we apply it to the pilgrim.
Didn't we say yesterday, actually, that they're really patur from all the mitzvot aseh?
That's a cheresh who is both
deaf
right?
and mute. He has to be the ones that are both.
Right, and that's classically what we mean by cheresh. Here, for some reason, we interpret the Mishnah. We didn't interpret the Mishnah that way, but the idea of a cheresh is expanded to mean either deaf or mute. That such a person, so a complete cheresh, a classical, both deaf and mute is still exempt, but it is of course exempt. But even one who is either deaf or mute is also exempt from korban re'iyah.
Okay, your sound is breaking up again.
All right, let me try it on the computer. I don't know why in this room for some reason.
Are you getting that, Miriam? The sound is breaking up.
Yeah. I also have it. When he turns in, when you turn in a certain direction, we can't hear you.
All right, just a second. Right.
I don't think I have Chagigah.
Shavua Tov. We just started, so we might have done 2 lines, maybe.
Okay, how's this?
Sounds better. Yeah.
Okay. You duplicated yourself.
Hold on. All right. I don't know why you're having trouble with the phone, but is this any better?
Sounds better.
Right now it is. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I think it's the charging stand that I'm putting it on. Maybe that's the problem. Okay. All right, let's continue. Sorry about that. If I'm breaking up again, let me know and I'll try to shift it or something.
Okay, great.
So we're going to link so as we will see in a moment, the mitzvah of hakel does not obligate someone who is either deaf or, and now we've linked that to the mitzvah of the korban riyah, the pilgrimage sacrifice. But now where do we, from the word leiraos, but the question is, where do we get that from in the first place, that hakel exempts such people? So v'hasaminol, where do we get that from? T'chsiv l'man yishmu l'man yilmadu, because about hakel it says, why did the people gather and listen to the Torah being read from the king? So that they will hear and so that they will learn, right? Be instructed. Tanya, and we have a brisa, l'man yishmu prat l'medaber ve'en shomea. So that they will hear, that obviously exempts somebody who can't hear, right? So even someone who speaks but cannot hear, he's exempt from hakel. Ulaman yilmadu, so that's one side of the equation. Now, what about somebody who can hear but cannot speak? Ulaman yilmadu prat l'shomea ve'en medaber. Someone who can learn excludes someone who hears but doesn't speak. Now, this Gemara questions right away. Wait a minute. If you can hear, you can learn, right? You can learn without speaking. Does that mean that if you can't speak, you can't learn? Like if you can hear but you can't speak, sure you can learn. And here's an example. There were these two mute people who lived in Rabbi's neighborhood. And B'nai Bartei Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, they were the grandsons of Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada. B'nai Achtei Rabbi Yochanan, maybe they were his nephews. The Chol Amos Dava Ayil Rabbi Levei Midrasha. Whenever Rabbi came to the base medrash, Havu Ayil Levi Yossi come out. They would come and they would sit and listen. And they would like nod their heads and move their lips, right? So they were listening. But they couldn't speak, so nobody knew if they were absorbing the material. So Rabbi prays for them. And they were healed, and they learned to speak. And they found that they knew everything. They knew halacha, they knew sifri, the whole shas of the Mishnah. So clearly, these people who could hear but could not speak were very capable of learning. So why would you say that Laman Yilmadu, that the ability to learn hinges on speaking? The answer is don't read so that they will learn, it's so that they will teach. Why do people go to Hakel? So they will learn and be able to teach. A teacher has to be able, in the Gemara's view, has to be able to speak. Otherwise, how do you instruct your students?
Well, I guess they're assuming that they weren't literate, that they couldn't write or something, or communicate, in writing.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's the
I would think everyone else was illiterate.
Yeah. Oh, that could be. Yeah. No, but the people, I mean, the presumed, well, although it's a Torah Shabbal Peh, so maybe you didn't have to be able to read. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, you can see how it's like, it's obvious, it's intuitive that someone who can hear can be able to learn, right? Even if you can't speak, you should be able to be educated. It's not speaking isn't as much of a barrier, although you can't ask questions, okay? But you can certainly listen. But it's more intuitive to say that someone who can't speak will have a much harder time teaching somebody else, right? That's much more of a barrier.
Yeah.
Ravashi said, and all of these things. I mean, I've introduced this many times, that the social and even the assumptions around disability in the Gemara are things that we contemporaries would have difficulty with in many cases. And indeed, the halachic authorities over the centuries have modified these based on the reality of people who are blind can read Braille, and it's not the people who are deaf and dumb are idiots. right?
Right.
It's really not the case,
They didn't have
right?
developed sign language, I guess, is assuming that they didn't have like the, sign language.
Right. Right. And there's all kinds of aids, and now, especially now, there's technologies for people. So I think that that regardless of whether we just say it's a product of a different time or a different mentality or whatever, I think we should acknowledge that we moderns may have different attitudes to some of the things that the Gemara takes for granted.
Yeah.
Certainly, when all the things we've been discussing about slavery and so on, you can't say every time you encounter someone who's or the idea of a slave, I would like to acknowledge every time that that horrifies us, right, or strikes us as immoral. But I think it's just something that has to be recognized, that the Gemara operated in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. Ravashi says, "Vadai l'man yelamedu uhu." Ravashi kind of reinforces it that the requirement for being obligated in Hakel is to be able to teach. The man yilamdu, because if you think that the Torah is telling you so that you will hear and so that you will learn, like it's the same thing. Like just because you can't speak, can't learn. And somebody who can't hear, like why do you need both? Like if you think that it means so that you will hear and learn, meaning to exclude people who can't hear and therefore can't learn, it's like the same thing. The Torah would be repeating itself. So it must be that means so that you can hear, excluding those who can't hear, and so that you can teach, excluding those who can't speak. So that's why we read it in a halachic sense as so that you go to Hakel so that you can hear and so that you can teach, and that excludes the two halves of the the two situations. It excludes person who cannot hear and excludes a person who cannot speak. Okay, Amar of Tantra. Here's another thing. What if you're deaf in one ear? So Rav Tanchum says, person who's deaf in one ear, he's also off the hook. He doesn't have to, he's not obligated in pilgrimage. Why? Shenamar biyaznehem, because about Hakel it says, read it in their ears. The ear is plural, so somebody who can't hear in both ears, then he's not obligated. So Gemara says, "V'hai baznehem v'vayle baznehem d'chul Yisrael." Of course, it's a plural because you're talking about everybody should hear. So you have to say ears. Here's your ear and your ear and your ear, right? So even a person with only one working ear should be obligated. Answers, Hahu mineged kol Yisrael nafka. We already said that the king reads before all of Israel. Okay, so all of Israel means the plural. We already have that. So when it emphasizes read it in their ears, it means somebody who only can. It means only someone who can hear in both ears. So Gemara says, wait a minute. Maybe that means if it only says the king has to read before everybody. Well, what if you're way in the back and you can't hear, right? So maybe that's okay. Right, so that's why the Torah says in their ears that no, it's not okay for you just to be there. You have to be able to hear, right? Which must have been quite a challenge without microphones. So Chasar Rahman be name. So that's why the Torah says, you actually have to in everybody's ears. Vuhu deshame, meaning that you have to be able to hear. So maybe the plural of ears still means everybody, not your two ears, but your ear and your ear and your ear. Right? So our answer is we already know that because Laman Yishmu, because the whole point of going, the Torah says, is so that you'll hear, right? So that we already know. So the fact that we use the word Ba'azneihem in their ears means you have to have two working ears. If you have one working ear.
The impulse here is to exclude people from this mitzvah here. That's all, that's the whole impulse.
Or you might say relieve them of the obligation. Certainly there's nothing in the bars coming, right? It's certainly anybody, right? But they don't have the obligation to come. That's the point. What if you're lame in one foot? If you're limping, right? So then you're off the hook too. Shenem are regalim, because because when the festivals are called regalim, and yesterday we saw that that was an oblique reference to using your feet to go on pilgrimage. So it's in plural. So you have to be able to use both your feet properly. If you're dragging one foot along, that doesn't count. So Gemara says, wait a minute. We said that there's another thing we get from the word regalim, that if you have a wooden, if you're using a stump, a wooden prosthesis, in other words, you've had part of your leg amputated, so you're relieved of the obligation by the word regalim. So the Gemara says, "Hahu mi pa'amim nafka." Now we have another word for that. Shalosh pa'amim b'shana, 3 times a year. So the word pa'amim, which means 3 times in this context, the same word also means the soles of your feet. So if you don't have soles of your feet, as we'll see, the Gemara will back this up in a minute with other quotes. So if you don't have soles of your feet, meaning you have a wooden leg, that you've already excluded that person. So by saying regalim, that you have to have the plural of feet or legs, that excludes a person who is lame in one leg. Okay, and where do we get this idea that pa'amim means also the time you have a brisa, pa'amim, 3 times in the year, and pa'amim el raglayim. This means the feet, right? The soles of the feet. And what's this proof text? Regel raglei ani pa'amei dali. The foot will trample it. The feet of a poor person. The soles of the poor. Okay, so here clearly the word pa'amim means the soles of the feet. V'omer, another proof is Mayafu pamayich banalim bas nadiv. From Shir Hashirim, how beautiful are your soles in your sandals, noble daughter. Okay. Now, since we've mentioned this from the Shir Hashirim, Darash Rava taught, Ma'yichsiv Mayafu banalim bas nadiv. What is the meaning of this verse? How beautiful are the soles of your feet in your shoes? How beautiful are the legs of people of Israel at the time that they go on pilgrimage. Bas Nadiv, Bita Shel Avram Avinu Shenikra Nadiv. They're called Bas Nadiv, the daughter of a people, meaning they're clearly the daughters of Avraham Avinu, who is called Nadiv. Where is he called Nadiv, a prince or a noble? Shenemar Nadivei Amim Nasafu Amel Avram. The nobles of the nations gathered, the nation of the God of Avraham, right? Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak Yaakov. Why is God called the God of Avraham? Was he not also the God of Yitzchak and Yaakov? Elohei Avraham Shayat Chila Legerim. Why is Avraham singled out? Because he was the first ger, the first convert, right? He converted himself, as it were, to proto-Judaism, right? To monotheism and the worship of the one God. So that's why Avraham is called so that's an aside, that Avraham is called the Nadiv. So the verse in Shir Hashirim is like, how beautiful are the people of Israel when they use their legs, the soles of their feet to go on pilgrimage. They're recognized then as the daughters of Avraham.
Miriam, do you know if pa'am still used in modern Hebrew for soles of the feet?
Oh.
Actually, I wouldn't know. No,
Yeah.
I mean,
okay, all right.
not sure.
Okay.
Rav Kana said, Darash Rav Nasan Bar Minumi Mishum Rabbi Tanchum, another teaching of Rav Tanchum. My dichsiv habor reikein b'mayim. When this is totally unrelated, except that it's said by the same Rav Tanchum. What is the meaning of the verse when they threw Yosef into the pit? The pit was empty and had no water. If it's empty, it has no water. What do you have to tell me? It has no water. Just say it's empty. But it was empty of water, but it wasn't empty of other things such as scorpions and snakes.
What is the connection here?
So I just said taught by the same Rabbi Tanchum.
All right.
Total tangent. Back to the topic. Tana Rabbanan, Rabbi Masib, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Rabbi Elazar ben Chisma. It happened with Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar. Shalchu lahakbil pnei Rabbi Yeshua b'Pekin. This is a very strange story. The background is that there was a well-known occurrence that's recorded elsewhere in the Gemara, where there was a great conflict between the heads of the yeshiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Gamliel, and they actually fired one of them, and then they let him back in, but then they had a problem like who's going to be in charge, so at alternate weeks, right? So they go to so these two go to greet Rabbi Yeshua in Pekin. He said to them, what did they teach today in the Beis Medrash? Well, they said, like, we're your students. You're asking us what's new. Everything comes from you, right? There's nothing going to be new to you. They're kind of showing him respect. He said, maybe so, but there had to be something new. There's always something new in the Beis Medrash. There's all these fertile minds there. There's always something new. Shabbos, so he says, Shabbos Shemiyah. So whose week was it? Shabbos Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So it was Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's week. And what was the topic of discussion today of his sermon? They said, Precious Hakel. He was talking about the mitzvah of Hakel, the gathering of the people to be read the Torah by the king. Uma Darshba knew, what did he say about it? Like, he's really having to like drag it out of them. So they answered, Hakel Masaham Anashim Anashim Bataf. The Torah says, gather the people, men, women, and children. Ima Nashim Baim Lilmod, Nashim Bos Lishma. So I understand why this is what was taught in the Beis Medrash. I understand why men come to learn and why women come to listen, to hear. Okay, like, presumably the idea is that women are not or commanded in Talmud Torah in like just the activity of learning for its own sake, but they still have a responsibility to know their responsibilities, right? They still have to know the halacha. They have to know what they have to know. So I understand why they have to come. Taf lamabain. Why do you have to bring the children? Kedei litain sachar l'mviyeh, and in order to give reward to those who bring them. So it's like. It's not like the children aren't benefiting necessarily directly, although we could certainly think of ways that children benefit by coming to a mass, Torah-based gathering. But here saying it's like so that the parents get reward for bringing them. Amar so he said to them, Rabbi Yeshua said, Margalis Tova Haisa, you had a pearl here. Why didn't you want to tell me? Right? You should have owned up to it right away. It's like, this is a beautiful thing. And thank you for telling me. The Darash. Now Rabbi Elazar also taught, Es Hashem Hamarta Hayom. You have, this is a pasuk in Devarim where Moshe says to the people, you have designated God today, and God has designated you. God says to the Jewish people, you have made me like unique in the world. I'm going to make you unique in the world. How did you make me unique? You've taken up this mantle of monotheism, right? God is one. I'm going to make you unique. So it's like your people, Israel, one nation in the world, unique nation. Okay, V'yafu pasach v'darash, and so then Rabbi Elazar continued teaching. Divrei chachamim kadarbanos uchamasmeros netuim balei asupos nitnu mero echad. This is the verse at the end of Koheles. The words of the sages are like spurs and like nails that are hammered in well. But I suppose like the masters of those who like people come to assemble to hear, their words are like well placed nails. Ninu mero echad, given by one shepherd. What does this mean? Why are the words of Torah compared to a spur? Just as a spur, if you're sitting on an ox and you spur the ox to direct him to plow the fields, like to plow the furrows, to keep him on the straight path, and the purpose of that is to bring life, right? For agriculture, right? To bring food to the world. So too, the words of Torah, they're like spurs that keep you on the right path from wandering off into the ways of death, into the ways of life. So ima darban zemi telltale, but just as if a spur, you can move from one ox to another ox. There's no fixed point, right? It can be used anywhere. It can be used to direct you might say, you might say that a spur can be used to direct the ox in any direction, but I think what it's getting at is, you can move it. I mean, it's a homological device anyway. So after Torah metaltalin, so maybe that means that the words of Torah are also movable, like they can be used to prove any point, perhaps, or it's not clear exactly what this mitaltel, that it can be moved, means, but the point is, Talmud Lomar Masmeros. It's not just like a spur; it's like nails. The nails, you hammer in a nail, it stays where it is, right? It's like fixed. It can't be moved to support some other piece of wood, right?
I think this whole thing is like, I mean, whether the Torah can evolve, I mean, if it's movable, if it's flexible, or is it rigid,
Exactly right.
So it's like this little encapsulation of two different worldviews of how you
right.
view on the Torah.
I see that the Torah keeps us fixed, right? It's not the nails that are, right? We're the boards, and the nails are keeping us fixed,
right.
Instead of wandering or becoming, disengaged or loose.
Okay.
Maybe we can take different paths in the Torah.
That's it. That a spur can be used or not used, right? You can kick the cow or you cannot kick the cow, but a nail, as James just said, I think that's a good point. You hammer a nail into a piece of wood, it's going to stay there, right? The Torah should be the same, that it's permanent.
Okay. In the analogy, we're not the spur or the nail, we're the cow or the board.
Yeah, exactly. Torah is the nail and Torah is the spur. Yeah. Okay. And now, but wait a minute, but nail isn't a good analogy either, because ima masmer ze chaser v'lo yaser. A nail, it kind of diminishes the space taken up by the wood. So like when you hammer a nail into a piece of wood, the wood doesn't expand, but it must be that it contracts because it's making room for the nail, right? So you might think that, I think that's what it's getting at. So just as a nail, it kind of diminishes the space taken up by the wood. So you might say, after Torah chaserin v'lo yuserin, maybe the words of Torah diminish you, and you're the wood, right? So as James said, so you're the wood, maybe you get diminished by Torah. And I think, like, to me, the point being made here is that, like, maybe you only have so much room in your brain, if you're learning Torah, then maybe you're losing out on learning something else, right? Science, arts, whatever, right? So Talmud Lomar Netuim, it's planted, well planted, the nail. Manatia zu paravarava, just as a plant, right? It's kind of a reference to plants, just as plants, are fruitful and multiply after the Torah part. So Torah is not static, and it's not like it can only, it takes up room in your brain that could be used for something else. No, it allows you to flourish even more, which I think is very nice way to look at it. Okay.
I would say I think the analogy is diminishing you as a person. Not, you would think the Torah would allow you to grow, but here we see the nail actually makes wood shrink.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, very good. And there are others, I saw in the notes here that it means like maybe it'll diminish you economically, right? Because I'm learning Torah, not earning money, so maybe you'll think you'll be diminished that way. So the blessing of Torah is that it should allow you to flourish nonetheless.
I was thinking it diminishes your personal autonomy, like, because it's like you're you know, you're giving up something of yourself by buying into the Torah system or something, but really you're not. It's really expanding you. So,
Yeah, okay, good interpretation. Yeah, there's a this is a very kind of fruit.
yeah.
Oh, Del, we lost your video. You're back.
Somebody tried to call me. Okay. Okay, I'm continuing to expound on this verse. Balei Asupos, who are the masters of the assembly? Eliu Talmidei Chacham Sheyoshvin Asupos Yoshvin Torah. These are the scholars who sit in groups and study Torah. Halalu Mitamin v'halalu Mitarin. Some come up with rulings that say something is Tamei, and some come up with rulings that say it's Tahar. Halalu Osrim v'halalu Matirin. Some groups will say such a thing is forbidden, and some permit it. Halalu Posin v'halalu Machshirin. Some say such a thing unfit, and some say it's fit. So how can I learn Torah? Like everything is so subjective. Like you can find support for anything, right? Like what's the point of learning if you go to one shir or to one rabbi and he says you can do this, and the other one says you can't do this? Like how could it all be valid? Kulam nitnu me'ero echad. They're all, this is the end of the verse. They're all given from one shepherd. El echad nasanan, one God gave all of these. Parnas echad amarim mipi adon kol hamasim baruch hu. One leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, told them to the people from the mouth of God. To Steve, Elohim is called Dvarim Ha'elez. It says at the beginning of the Ten Commandments, God spoke all these things. Afata asei oznecha kaparchetes. Make your ear like a funnel. Uknei lev mevin, and get an understanding heart. Lishmoa estivrim mitamim ve'estivrim mitarim. Understand, like listen to all sides. Listen to the words of those who say something is tamei. Listen to those who say it's tahor. Estivre osrin, estivre matirin. Those who say it's forbidden or permitted. Estivre kosin, estivre matirin are those who say something is unfit, and those who say it's fit. So that's a very nice thought also, right? You have to be able to hold all these things, all these different opinions. Shivim panim Torah, as we often say, there's 70 facets to the Torah. There, it can encompass multiple views, even sometimes those which are contradictory. So going back to Rabbi Yeshua, who was listening to his students tell all these things that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said in the yeshiva, he said, "Ein dor yosem sure Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah sure b'sacho." Rabbi Elazar says good stuff. There's no, his generation is not an abandoned, an orphan generation. So now the Gemara says, "V'leim relay behedya." Why did they have to go through this like false modesty thing? Like, oh, we can't teach you anything new. Everything comes from you. And he had to kind of drag it out of them. And then all of a sudden they had all these things to say. Why didn't they just tell them in the first place? Because of another story that occurred. Now this is the strange part. The Tanya, taught in the Brisa, Masi Rabbi Yossi ben Dur Maskis. This happened to Rabbi Yossi. Shalach la'akil b'nei Rabbi Eliezer b'Lod. He went to visit his teacher Rabbi Eliezer in Lod. He said to him, Machin Shayvesh Nishayom. He asked him the same thing. What's new in the base marriage today? So he answered right away. Nimnu v'gamru amon moav ma'asrin maser ani b'shvis. They voted on this issue. What is the status of the land of Ammon and Moab? So that was conquered by King David. So in the first temple period, it was considered part of the land of Israel. But when Ezra returned from Babylonia, they did not extend their dominion over such a large territory, and the lands of Ammon and Moab were not included in their borders. So what is their status regarding Shvis? So regarding the seventh year? So the answer is they voted that not only is there no Shemitah required there, but you have to give Masaran. You have to give a tithe for the poor, which usually is third and the 6th years. They extended that to the 7th year for so he told him right away, basically, what was new in the base medrash. Amarlo, so he said, Yossi, Yossi, stretch out your hands and your eyes and like darken your eyes. Apparently, he stretched out his hands and he became blind. And Rabbi Eliezer, who kind of decreed this on him, who was like upset with him for seems like he was upset with him, as we'll see in a minute, that this wasn't an original statement. Like this had already been taught by others, so he was kind of misrepresenting. So he went blind apparently. Bachar Elazar cried. So Hashem Lirev Risa God's secret is to his to those who fear him. So here he's apparently trying to say that that the incident here or the decision he reported was correct because it was in line with something that was known already, like that was already promulgated earlier by the Anshe Knesset Zakdol. Amarlo, and he said to him, Lechem Arlahem, Al Techushu L'Minyanchem. Don't worry about the like having voted on this. Like he's saying, like you don't even need to vote on this. What if you voted the other way? You would have been wrong, right? This is a known rule from the law, but he sent a message to them, like don't worry about it. That you voted on it. Yochanan ben Zakkai Shisham Rabo. This is a tradition that I got from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I got it from his teacher, from Rabbo. It was an ongoing tradition. It's actually halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That such territories would have to use the 7th year for Maser, which is really a very strange thing, because how can you have a tradition of something that only occurred centuries in
right?
So I'm not quite making this. So
wait, what happened with the blind guy?
Conquer them in the Torah. I mean, didn't they?
Guy story that the blind guy will come back. Don't worry, spoiler alert, but he's going to get healed. But like the point of the story is that the reason that in our first story that the students didn't want to tell him right away what happened in the Beis Medrash is like, oh, like what if the same thing happens to us? Like it turns out that what they taught in the Beis Medrash wasn't original, and our teacher is going to strike us blind. Mm-hmm. So in this story, he gets healed eventually, but we'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's finish up with the status of the lands of Ammon and Moab. Matam, what's the reason that you don't have Shemitah in the lands of Ammon and Moab? There were many places, many cities that were conquered by the people of Israel when they came up from Egypt. They conquered a wide area. But in the return from Babylonia, these territories were not conquered. Because the original sanctification of Israel was only temporary, right? Once the exile happened, it was canceled. So how come when they came back from Babylonia, they didn't exercise dominion over all these lands of Ammon and Moab? Just for that exact reason, so that there would be a place where you could grow things and support the poor. And now back to the guy who got struck blind, Rabbi Yossi Tana, the Brisa Larshan is Yashvadato after Rabbi Elazar calmed down. Amar, he said, Yehi Ratzon Sheyatzu Ani Yossi L'Ko, and he prayed that Yossi's eyes should be restored with sight, B'chazru, and that indeed. Okay. All right. So like I said, I found that a very strange thing. Tana Rabbis, Ezu Shota. So the Mishnah said that another person who is exempt from the mitzvah of Re'iyah, of the pilgrimage sacrifice, is someone who is insane, right? Hayotze, or mentally challenged, let's say, mentally deficient. So how do you recognize or identify such a person? Hayotze Yechidi B'Layla, somebody who goes out alone at night, or someone who sleeps in cemeteries, Kareos Ksuso, and somebody who walks around with torn clothing. Obviously not for for an Avel, right? But someone who for no reason has tears his clothes. These are all signs of not being quite all there mentally. Itmar, we have a statement. Rafuna Amar, Rafuna said, actually, these three you have to have to be identified as a shota. It's all three of these things, these criteria. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Afilu b'Yachzner. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, any of these criteria are enough to classify you that way. Hechidami. So wait, what are we talking about? Ida avilu derech shtus. You're doing it in a crazy way, like if you're acting crazy, and you're clearly deranged, and that's when you go to sleep in the cemetery, or when you wander about, or when you tear your clothes. If you're acting crazy, so any of these signs, like if you're acting crazy, tearing your clothes, or you're acting crazy and sleeping in the cemetery, then that's should be a good indication. And if it's not, if you're acting normal but you go sleep in the cemetery, even if you do all three of these things, like you're absent-mindedly tearing your clothes, and you like sleeping
while sleeping in a cemetery at night.
Yeah, you like sleeping outdoors, and you like to go on long walks, right? Those are not, even if all three of those things are not signs of craziness. So the answer is the Olam.
It could be homeless, maybe, and sleeping in the cemetery, right? And being of your right mind, just economically or something.
Exactly. So Leolam Tekahavi Ludelshu. So we are indeed talking about somebody who acts crazy while doing these things. So, but if you're acting if you're acting crazy and doing only one of these things, you could say that, okay, if you're acting crazy and sleeping in the cemetery, you might say that because you want to be visited by demons. And if you're going out alone at night, Amor Gandrifas Achte, maybe that you had a fever, or whatever, you needed the fresh air. So even if you're acting crazy, it doesn't mean that you're really crazy, right? You could be acting crazy because you don't feel well, and that's why you have to go out and get some fresh air. Maybe if you're tearing your clothes and acting crazy, maybe it's like you just happen to be kind of lost in thought. It doesn't mean you're not responsible for doing mitzvah. That's kevan davdin kulu. But if you're doing all three of these things, then that indicates havalahu to me nagach shor chamor v'gamal. So it's v'nasamu lokal. It's analogous to the case of an ox. So an ox that gores other animals, the first two times the owner only has to pay half damages, because it's like that. It's somewhat accidental, right? You didn't know that your ox is inclined to do that. But after three times, it's like, now like you have to take extra precautions. And if you allow your ox to come in contact with other animals and they get damaged, you have to pay full damage, right? Mm-hmm. What happens so that applies if every time your ox encounters a camel, he attacks the camel, okay? But what if an ox, like one day attacks the camel, one day a donkey, and one day another ox? So the three times nasamua lakal. No, you can't classify it anymore as he's only going after specific animals that make him crazy. It's like, no, he's totally crazy. He's totally messed up ox, or he's totally an aggressive ox, and because he did all these three things, there was no indication that he's more inclined to attack one kind of animal and not another. So it's the same with it's the same. By analogy, the person who acts crazy and does all of these three crazy things is, we can't let him off the hook. We assume that he's completely out of his mind, and to an extent that he is not obligated in mitzvah. Rav Papa says, if Rav Huna had heard the following. How do you identify someone who's considered a shota? Somebody who can't keep his stuff together. Whatever you give him, he loses or he destroys. He would have changed his opinion. He would have said, yeah, this is a better definition of somebody who's a shota. So they ask, would he have, what would he have changed about his original statement, the part about tearing the clothes? Because it's like not just clothes, it's anything else. Like would he have said, oh, I didn't mean just clothes? He would have said, oh, apparently it's anybody who destroys any of his worldly goods. Or maybe it's saying that he would have
backed down from all of these definitions and said, no, this Bryce is teaching us that the real definition of a shota is somebody who destroys his possessions. Where it says, no, and we will pick it up here tomorrow morning.
This reminds me of the DSM manual for classifying, whether somebody fits into a certain category. The area, somebody has a certain condition. Like if it has 4 out of this, whatever, 5 out of the 10 or something like that, then you can say that this person is whatever. So this is kind of like the same thing. You put out these criteria and whether, how many have to be met. Kind of analogous to what modern psychology kind of tries to do in terms of classifying conditions.
Diagnosing. What you're really talking about is diagnosing.
Yeah, exactly. You have to give some criteria. So,
Right.
I should stop losing things.
Otherwise, you'll be patur from all these things, James. Okay. Thank you, Doug.
I thank you, Shavua Tov.
Oh my.
Thank you. Shavua tov.
Thank you.